I'm pretty sure approved it.
You think
Yeah.
They get one more. I'm gonna need it.
I'm working very hard.
I'm right on the edge of my neighborhood, stay out of spearheaded this, I'm not sure if it's just.
Boy, I wasn't planning on seeing you tonight. See you tomorrow.
Ask questions. Pretty sure I need to get up and speak here, but
Or else it's gonna.
It's like it was a beach. I know. Were you at the one in September?
Seconds.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
Did you go to that one?
Yeah, I'm.
Yeah, I was the one with
It
the,
wasn't September.
I was the one with the three children,
Congratulations.
but I don't know if you read that.
Well, you're all done.
My grandsons were with me.
That was good.
Yeah. That's good to hear. I think it's one of those awesome.
Yeah.
Downtown. Yeah, I can't do that.
Started about 6 months ago, but yeah.
That's just back.
That's good.
Oh, I know, I spent Fridays in a row, at home. Whenever we're really told.
Well, I'm not gonna keep you out of trouble if I sit by you, so.
One October in the basement. What are we planning? What are we doing?
Well, hello, everybody. It's 5:30. We want to start on time, respect your time. We're hoping for a little bigger crowd, but we'll take quality over quantity any day. I'm Scott Jesse with County Planning. And I want to start in a place that we started with you a year ago, which is, what are we not doing tonight? We brought a map in the back of the Liberty Lake TIF and LIFT district boundary. We've heard from a number of Otis Orchards folks about the notification sign that was put at Harvard and Euclid for future investments in that. And briefly what that is, well, first off, when I say what we're not doing, this is a sort of classic case of government where one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. Planning has nothing to do with this tax increment district or its projects. We didn't know the sign was going up. We didn't know it was going to be renewed. Now, that said, renewing it is helpful because it gives the county and Liberty Lake access to about $20 million a year in state funding that would match funds generated by new investment in the district. So it's a sense of bringing money in for public projects. Those public projects,
You're talking about the Liberty Lake, you're talking south of the river, correct?
yes.
Okay.
But the district was drawn north of the river when it was created 10 some years ago. And that's the confusing part. All of these projects have to be done in the urban growth area, and the urban growth area does not extend across the river. So even though the district is over there, none of this investment is happening on the north side of the river. It's all happening on the south side. And like I said, we started this out a year ago when a group of landowners was asking Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District to petition into the district for sewer along Harvard, north of the river, and the district turned them down at that time. But lots of folks showed up here, and that was on a Monday night, and we were here on a Thursday night, and they thought that somehow we were also driving that. We had to say, no, that's not us either. We oppose that as well. And that's when I got to meet a lot of folks from Otis Orchards, where we discovered what a special place it is and what we want to do from the planning side to preserve and keep it. So again, I wanted to start out with, before you think I lied to you in the spring, start out with, well, we didn't know this was happening either. And I hate to say it's not our fault, but it also has no impact or threat to what we're doing for comprehensive planning. It's a totally separate thing to build public projects on the south side of the river in that TIF district area. So get that out of the way. And if there's any questions I can answer, like I said, it's a matching fund thing. So it really does bring more than 40 or $50 million into the community to build sidewalks, other infrastructure projects. So as that, nonetheless, today we have a lot that we've accomplished since we last saw you. We're going to go through a bunch of slides. We'll leave plenty of room for conversation at the end. And since we've got a small group, particularly, if there's a question, just jump in and interrupt. If I don't catch you, just say, hey, stop for a second. As you probably know, this is the core metro urban growth area. The, kind of yellow and orange areas are the existing UGA. The green areas are what are called the urban reserve areas, and those are the areas where our predecessors in planning, those that were with us and on the planning commission in 2001 doing the first plan, including Mr. Hasse back there. We're looking at where are we going to start growing into the 2020 once we're past the UGA. We're doing that at this stage through an environmental impact analysis or an environmental impact statement. It goes through, it's a way of simplifying very complex arguments. And what it does is it ultimately creates three baseline alternatives. One is no action, which means if we take no action to change the development regs, the comprehensive plan policies, or the boundaries of the urban growth area, how do we accommodate 100,000 people over that 20-year period? The second is, can you change only your development regulations, meaning increase densities and accommodate 100,000 within your existing boundaries? And the third is, do that and expand out in a pattern that's been more traditional that we've used in the past. So the two alternatives are what we call bookends. They're kind of one extreme or the other. We're going to be studying those, talking to you about them tonight. We'll be working with our planning commission on the 30th, and we'll be briefing the board on the 3rd to get their direction on if they want to tighten that up or if they want to provide some direction on where to grow. This is one of the challenges we have is, in addition to just general growth, 100,000 persons allocated over the various cities and towns in the county, we now have to allocate space by income bands in the housing levels. And this is for the towns. This is not for the rural areas. But it's very different from what was done in the past. And it changes the way you have to plan for growth, because you can't simply put a subdivision somewhere. Now you have to say, can it serve lower income populations in ways that it doesn't today? And so this is a new mandate from the Growth Management Act that we're getting our hands around. The other key area that has made a lot of progress since we saw you is our critical areas of the critical area ordinance. This is, along with the shoreline management program, this drives all of the environmentally sensitive lands and planning in the county. You can see some of the highlights here, notably the critical aquifer recharge areas. Obviously, everybody wants to keep their clean water. And so we've looked at all of these. We're putting through a series of what we call best available science. How is the rest of the world looking at this? How's technicians looking at this? And we'll be bringing those recommendations back as a guide for where you should and where you shouldn't grow. This, if some of you have followed the discussion we've had on wind power in the southern part of the county, we've produced what we call a constraint map on here are the places you really should not want wind towers, and then you leave what's left over as this is maybe suitable for that. It's a little bit similar here. Where do you want to protect things and where do you have to be careful? There's our aquifer. It is big. Most people think it's infinite. It's not quite infinite, but it needs a great deal of protection. This is how that kind of plays out in the county specifically, and the graphic over on the left side is a highlight of the West Plains, which if you note here, the aquifer follows the river and then kind of bends up. It hits a little Spokane coming across here. So all of this area from the West Plains, the airport is right here, Fairchild is over here. This all draws water from a totally different system. Although if it's kind of a catch-22 or a catch in one way, if it's served by the city of Spokane, it draws out of this aquifer. But if it's drawing on wells or other community resources, it draws out of a different aquifer out on the West Plains. And there's all sorts of geologic history with this that comes from floods that happened 20 and 50,000 years ago that scoured the lands and created these scab lands that go all the way through the southwestern part of the county. Eastern Washington is working on a study out there chiefly to look at contamination, the PFAS issues and things like that, and how they have been distributed through the water system from individual wells and through what are called these paleo channels. which are these leftover scoured areas where the glacier water came through and scoured them down, and now they filled with rocks, so water moves through them very, very easily. Which means if you've got contaminated water, it also moves through them very easily. And this is a, non-technical diagram of the difference of the West Plains aquifer. It's actually got two layers. This upper aquifer and then a sedimentary layer in between and a lower aquifer. And so among other challenges is if you drive a well through the top aquifer, go through that partition in between, you can actually drain parts of an aquifer or you can contaminate one from the other because they're separate by millions of years of water, and you can poke a hole through them. So it's a little bit fragile. Other critical areas, frequently flooded areas, not so much over here as much, but see around Newman Lake, some of the steep slopes, some of the things that have to be encountered on the east part of the metro as well. Wetlands prevalent throughout the county, but again, you could clearly see that kind of scabland effect in the southwest portion of the county from Highway 2 south, essentially. And so these are some of the areas that we look at for where do you have to protect resources? Because once you build on them or move them or destroy them in some way, you don't get them back. And so they're in a sense, lifetime of that. The second or the third element of this growth strategy is climate and resiliency. This is another new element. And we've talked about this briefly in our earlier sessions. It's an element added to the Growth Management Act by the legislature in the last session, now requiring cities and counties to plan for climate change, resiliency in development. That means looking at identifying things like greenhouse gas emissions, trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Those are not always popular topics in Eastern Washington, and yet they still have some relevance. Many of you, I'm sure, remember the 2023 fires, the Elk and Gray fire that destroyed 10,000 structures. That's not necessarily a cause of resiliency, but it's something that if you think about how to protect yourself from that a little bit ahead of time, you can have a little better chance of getting through those things. So all of that said, here's kind of the meat of what we're talking about, the alternatives. As we said, this one is essentially density studies to try to incorporate as much as 25,000 new housing units in the county's portion of our responsibility, which is the urban growth areas outside of the cities themselves. To do that, we need to look at increasing the density limits of our existing zoning. So right now, the LDR, low density residential, allows up to 8 units an acre. The county board made that decision in 2020 to go from a maximum of 6 to a maximum of 8 in reflection of the housing crisis at that time. Now, 5 years later, we're still not catching up on housing. But during that time, builders built about 4.5 units an acre. That was kind of the effective density. And that went up a little bit, but it was pretty constant over the years. So we're looking at, well, what happens if that effective density goes just to 6, fairly modest increase? And then these other increases, because you can do, obviously, these are more multifamily projects, but you can do residential in these other zoning elements in the county currently. And so what this is saying is if you change your code, how many more residential units can you get in the same amount of land? We've got a few examples of what that looks like. The one on, the one on the left. I can manage to not spill this tonight, it'll be great. Represents about 6 units an acre. It looks, pretty typical streetscape residences on that, street trees. But in the back of each of those yards is a structure almost the same size as the house itself. It's called a dual loaded lot, and it's like much bigger than if you had an accessory dwelling unit or the old called in-laws apartments. But that's the kind of density you get even at 6 units an acre. At 9 units, you can see the single family homes have really lost their side yards almost entirely. And then the other clusters are townhomes or duplexes, triplexes, and others that are still single family, but they're attached projects. They're not detached where it can heat the yard around them. If you go into the medium density area, you can still do a mix at 15 units an acre with some single family in the areas, duplexes along here, carriage houses, townhomes and others in the middle. And then when you get to the 18 an acre, you're really talking traditional multifamily, 3-story walk-ups, formal open space, no individual yards. And so we put those up there because ultimately your comments inform us. We talk to our planning commission, they study these, we make recommendations. Our board of county commissioners looks at this and go, we like this, we don't like this so much, we want to find something somewhere in between. But we think these are useful to get a sense of what does that number mean per acre, because it looks like that. So on the east part of our metro, for this alternative one, we've identified several study areas. We're just gonna go through one here as an example.
Scott, you had a question, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you know, in Liberty Lake, like off of Indiana, around Orchard Park, that housing where it's still being developed, that's probably somewhere between 9 and 15 per acre?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, and I don't wanna cast density as something to be avoided. Density is a factor of design more than anything else. If you have really high quality residential design, community design, neighborhood design, you could have 9 and 10 units an acre, and it's a very comfortable place to live. It's when if you don't have all of those factors that it becomes this somewhat unpleasant place to go. Did that help?
Yes, our definition of unpleasant is different though.
So anyway, these are, you can see kind of small areas, but these are study areas within the current urban growth area that would be looking at changing those density patterns. And so it would be, looking at an area here, which has a C-store, this has changed from, golf course and other things into multifamily. This has developed over time. And if those densities were increased, what could you, do in that? Are we getting somebody online?
No, I thought I turned it on, do on.
No worries. No worries. And so that site context, this is that corner store or a corner with the C-store. That's the small area on the other land. This is that multifamily that's starting to develop around that. The good part about that is there are things that could develop in this corner where those that are living in that multifamily could still walk to that. They don't have to use a car to get some, basic services. Another one is changing this LDR into a neighborhood commercial, which is a mixed use category to have more of those walkable things happen. This one is near the high school. It would change from a long time, technically industrial lot and the high school into something else. And you could see those here, which, the produce area is there, and then there's that one remaining part at the high school back from the old gun club days over here. In a way, you could think, well, does that make any sense? It's like, well, there's a high school, there's a residential there, that might be a good spot for small shops or something else. So that's what these density examinations can do. They can provide some infill targets. I'm sorry, can you, I'm in your way.
Oh, no, it's not you, it's just not angled correctly.
So they can provide some opportunities to bring in some services and amenities that don't exist right now.
So what are you thinking about doing in that area where the gun club was?
Well, that belongs to the school district.
So that'll all stay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's whatever their long-term plan goes all the way back through there. So in alternative 2, now we're looking at the quality of urban development in a whole range, but also leaving room for that lower density, single family detached at 4.5 units an acre that might require more land than we currently have in that UGA boundary. And it's important, the second bullet point is very important because that's the pattern of development that people moved here for over the last 20 years, for the most part. So that's what people want. Builders have responded to that. That's what they build. They know how to build it for, well, at least perhaps not affordable price anymore, but it's out there in the market. And we have the pressures that we recognize, whether real or imaginary, but we have the pressures from Kootenai County. That if we can't provide some kind of a product like this, it ends up in Post Falls, sitting on top of the Rasmus Prairie Aquifer and probably not on sewer systems. So these are some of the, what we call guiding principles. Back to where we started tonight, we've got to consider where should you build and where should you protect. Having these amenities in this new neighborhood and placemaking idea. This one is something that hasn't been thought of outside of really city of Spokane, and that happened by a historic accident. And that's where somebody in the 1800s built a bungalow, raised their family, moved out, somebody moved in, raised their kids, they moved out, then they had these taking over these old houses over time, and ultimately you had neighborhoods with a whole range of ages. Some were new families that were in an old house, some were still older people that were still in that house. And that was generally kind of a highly desirable thing to have. You got to know your neighbors, you liked your neighbors. We don't always think about that when we allow platting today. It's 5 floor plans of essentially a 3-bedroom house, and everybody moving in is pretty much at the same income family level. So you've got a lack of different things happening in that. And we're trying to say, can we help build neighborhoods instead of just those subdivisions with some guidance to do that? And you can see some other things. Did I hear somebody? Oh, sorry. So the concepts, and kind of going through this, the neighborhood compatibility, streetscapes, climate, and we'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And these are the kind of technical changes, the density allowances, the larger parcels being thought of as planned for these neighborhoods, the smaller ones more typical to what they've got today. And for those of you that actually like reading zoning codes or seeing the details on how things are done, these are some of the standards of how that ends up showing up in a code or a policy, from existing ones to desired or proposed. Some of them are pretty different. Some of them stay the same. A lot of them change in terms of the dimensional standards, which are historic from zoning codes back to 1913. They don't serve a particularly useful purpose in many cases, and they certainly prevent the building of affordable housing in certain areas. So,
Excuse me, but what do you call affordable housing?
oh, it's an incredibly difficult question to answer. The way the state has asked us to consider it through that commerce tool on the slide that was way up front, where we have to look at what we call these income bands. They're based on the area's median household income, which is about $78,000.
Sorry.
And that is then broken down, if you make 80% of that or 50% of that, you're in this band. And what the band says is the community, the county, and this is really a challenge because under the law, counties are treated the same as cities, and it just doesn't work as well. But it means that the housing provided, the housing that you could get in that income band, you can spend 30% of your income and cover your housing costs. And if you think about that, that's almost impossible right now. And so affordability is a term that is tossed around, and even by me tonight, but it's not one that we have much of a handle on actually building. And if you think of the other part, both here, in the city of the valley with the industrial park, the job and growth industry on the West Plains, those they're good, stable jobs, but they're starting at minimum wage, and they're moving up from that. It's very hard to provide for a family at 18 or 19 or 20, $25 an hour and be able to afford a house, especially to purchase a house. And so there's all of those changes in how you consider policy to say, is there something we can do to provide an opportunity for this to happen? In other words, if we reduce the lot sizes, will a developer, a builder, figure out a way to build an 800 square foot house that is affordable to somebody that makes $65,000? Or is it still gonna be a 2,800 square foot house where you're gonna have to have a six-figure income to pay for your property? So it's looking at how can we change the governmental rules to see if the market will respond and build something that fits what Spokane County has. But it's the perfect question. Yes.
So how much of affordable housing is subsidized? I can talk, subsidized, I can talk. Is there a percentage or,
Excuse me, no, I don't have a percentage.
but
there
some
are-
are?
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah. There are many programs that provide something from a housing voucher that says here, the government will guarantee this amount of rent for somebody that's renting a project. There are things like Habitat for Humanity that trades some sweat equity for part of this. But you're heading into a question that's we're looking at, because to make that happen is gonna require a different shift in land values, in construction costs, and the ability to afford something. Hayden Homes, one of the builders in town, just opened a home on the north side of the city of Spokane. In a program, they use their corporate foundation to buy down the interest rate. And what they do is they sell it to someone that fits this income band with a 30-year 0% mortgage. That's kind of a big deal. So, that's a tool, but that's coming from the private sector. That's not a government subsidy. So, yes.
I would just say, generally speaking, any new construction that is affordable, to somebody that makes less than 60% of their earning median income would have to have some type of government subsidy in terms of capital or in terms of operating subsidy in order to pencil out financially, potentially even up to 80% AMI, earning income 80%. So everything below 60%, probably a lot of the stuff between 60 and 80%, which doesn't often get built, would have to have some sort of subsidy in order to be considered affordable for people that it's designed or space to be built.
I would not disagree with that. And in the analysis that our staff is doing based on Commerce, the early assumption is if you're in that, say, 60% and under, you're not gonna be able to afford to buy anything. You're gonna be in multifamily rental housing. That will be the only affordable thing you can do.
Right.
We're trying to see if can we push that envelope and provide some opportunity for someone to actually buy something in there.
It's really interesting to see that because obviously smaller and more dense areas that are well planned by nature cost less per household. So.
It's been
but
done.
That's about new construction. Obviously,
Yeah.
you have to plan for new growth, new households coming in with certain AMI bands. You can't necessarily account for existing housing that is already somewhat affordable by virtue of being old or dumpy.
That's mostly true for us in the county because we are chiefly responsible for those areas outside of the cities, but in the urban growth areas. And all of that is newer than the core of the city of Spokane, even the valley to some degree. So it changes the dynamic. It's not one that we are, as a government, are responsible for because all of our housing stock is a little bit newer, coming from those edge growth areas. So
I have an online participant who has a.
okay, and then back to Ron.
Over to her. Okay, Victoria.
Hi, can you hear me? Perfect. Hi, my name is Victoria O'Banion, and I work in the manufactured housing industry. So my question is, what is the role of factory-built housing in meeting some of these needs? Often factory-built homes are built and sold for a fraction of the cost of site-built homes.
Absolutely, very good point. They would play a completely valuable role in this. All types of innovative construction would be considered. from, you know, the modular construction to offsite construction to manufactured housing itself. Is on a smaller scale, but right here in the Valley Industrial Park, Mercer Mass Timber is looking at how you build cross-laminated timber that can change some of the dynamics on more affordable, bigger structures. So we're not ruling out anything from being able to meet those demands. In fact, the idea of this plan is to provide a lot of flexibility for the market to respond to those things in creative ways and not run up against building and planning codes that are old and out of date.
Well, what about more stuff like make things more affordable? You know, obviously there's different builders or developers out there, or, you know, these regulations that are state, not county. But what about some of our property and our county taxes, you know, I mean. It's just a citizen and, you know, it seems like our property taxes just keep going up in our county quite a bit every year. You know, based on everything else, does that not play a role into affordability?
Oh, of course, and you'll want to be speaking that question to our commissioners rather than the planning director, but I get you. Of course it does, and we're cognizant of the fact that in our shop that deals with site planning and then we hand off to our building department, most builders are more concerned with performance. How do we evaluate their project? How fast can we get it out the door so that they can get something in the ground, start selling lots and start getting revenue in for the costs they're putting in up front? It's not the cash cost of that permit. It's how fast does a staff perform to get a project through the system. And so that's how we're building our shop. And we're building it to be a growth agency, not a regulatory one. But it's different. There are a lot of places, and some places, because of such high demand, like Seattle, can afford to say, no, you're gonna do it our way, or you're not gonna do it at all. You can go over here if you wanna do something.
And I will say that Spokane County, out of all the other counties around where. Personally, I file for a lot of building permits in a lot of counties. Spokane County is they're very fairly priced compared to other counties. And we are, I feel that we are fair priced on our permit costs.
I mean, there's a question up here, but you should tell people you are on the planning commission. You wear a couple of different hats, and so.
I'm a builder in this area, and I'm also I'm a planning commissioner. So I am very passionate about our community in so many different realms, and sometimes I ask questions as a citizen. Or, you know, I'm just asking.
And I say that because that's a skill that we value. Most planning commissions are filled with architects, planners, you know, others that are in the field. Getting people on our planning commission that have real world experience can help us when we have these discussions say, this is good, this is not, that one's BS, you know, and then gives us a reality check of what we're doing as professional planners. So we value having that range of experience on our planning commission. I just thought it's important that, you know, that anybody's making that, you know, discussing about that, you know, kind of gives you the full disclosure that, yeah, they're actually they're in the system and they're gonna be helping us make this decision. Yes, ma'am.
So you say that right now you are focusing on changing the way that you handle building permits and trying to help people get them through more quickly. With the changes to UGAs in various areas, does the amount of criteria you've set as the required amounts, does that help speed things along for building?
Are you asking criteria for lands to be evaluated for
Incorporated into-
including in the
yes.
UGA? Well, ultimately, yes, because it'll make them eligible if they're selected in that path of growth. But at the moment, you could also say, well, that's another regulatory hurdle to get over. That hurdle. And I truly hate passing the buck, but that hurdle is one the state imposes on us. There are the statutory criteria for how you grow an urban growth area, we'll get to in a couple of slides, is highly regulated. Spokane County has challenged that in the past 10 or 15 years, and we've been found out of compliance. So we're looked at as someone that, you know, the regulators need to keep their eye on, because we're trying to get away with something in our urban growth areas. So we're trying to do this in a way that keeps us in compliance, but provides the easiest path to development. That's the second part, and that's why if lands are coming into the UGA that are new, we want to add this new kind of neighborhood zoning that gives this flexibility, so you could build single-family detached up to mid-level townhomes, stacked flats, all in the same zone without having to get a zoning change or another comprehensive plan amendment. That could all happen in one piece of land with one action. And that's just, nothing like that could be done here today. If you go past that 4.5 units an acre, you're into multifamily. That's 12 to 15 units an acre. Well, if you want 16 to 18, now you have to go into high density residential. All of those are zone changes that take a year or more to accomplish in the regulatory system. We're saying with design and development standards, you can do that entire range based on what you're finding in the market and what your customers are telling you they want. So it's a trade.
Do you mean 4.5 per acre on a single acre parcel, or are you talking about 4.5 per acre on, say, a 5 acre lot or parcel?
It could be both. The 4.5 units an acre is the historic 10-year average of what's been built in an unincorporated Spokane County. So that encompasses smaller parcels up to 100-acre parcels. We are seeing, notably in the city of Spokane, we're seeing a lot of infill development where a half-acre lot is being split into 4 units. That's not happening. We're not seeing that in the urban growth areas out in the county so much, but we are seeing, we're seeing 1-acre lots. As an example, a 1-acre lot a year ago up near Whitworth University. And so there's a big demand for housing right next to a college. It has one old historic property on it, was being subdivided into 4 units. Each of those was going to be a quadplex. So ultimately now 16 bedrooms in each one of these things. There could be 96 people on that piece of property by the zoning rules that existed at the time. One of the first things everybody looked at is, where are they going to park? This is a 1-acre lot. Where are you going to put 60 people in this thing? So you can, if you really want to cram lots onto a site, you can do it. From our perspective, it leaves no room for side yard, backyard, trees, shade, sidewalks, anything. You're going to be just tight to the sidewalks. So we want to stretch it out. Did I answer your question?
Parts of it.
Parts.
I'll continue to listen, and see if the rest gets answered.
Does planning, how much does planning put, into the thought of, like right now, I-90 between the state line and Barker, there's an accident daily, and some of them have been fatal, like weekly, you know, do they look like we're not built for I-90 to have more transportation on it, or?
We do. So, when all of this planning work is being done, it's not just houses on land, it's transportation. If you're building this, what's the transportation facility need to look like to support it? Is sewer and water, are the pipes in the ground big enough to support more development in that area? And so there's a whole range of things that go into ultimately where these properties will be selected for future growth. I-90 is a great example. If we can't, and this is one of those things that makes, and I don't want to criticize an environmentalist, we all are in our own ways, but it drives them crazy, because if we want to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases coming from automobiles and trucks, we should be building more housing closer to where people have jobs and shopping and school. If we can't build that housing here because it's prohibited, we can't expand our UGA because we have to focus on this infill growth that people don't want, it goes to Idaho. Now we're putting all the traffic over there, we're making the traffic on I-90 worse, and we've got to build more lanes on I-90. How does that accomplish, you know, the goals of what we're talking about? And yet, that is exactly the conundrum that we're faced with, is making that choice.
So the Liberty Lake, south of the river. That development that is going to be huge. Was the transportation even, I mean, it seems like if transportation is a huge issue and they're building a bunch of more, several more houses that are going to produce more traffic. And how is that looked at then? I mean, do they say, no, you can't have any more because there's not enough room on the roads, there's not enough sewage, there's not enough.
It's, I can't answer specifically because, I don't know what Liberty Lake decided to do. Typically, though, if a developer wants to build on that property, at least a traffic impact study is done to say, well, this is what the impact will be based on 100 units, this many trips in the morning peak hour, this many trips in the afternoon peak hour. You need another lane, you need intersection, you need traffic light improvements, and they lay out, these are the things you must do if you're gonna handle that traffic without clogging up the system. Developers have a choice. They can cover that they have to pay for it. They can cover that cost, or they can say, I better downscale to make this thing fit. It's a hard choice, and sometimes governments are anxious to get development and don't push as hard as they might for some of the improvements that are ultimately necessary. And there's several examples, for, again, the city of Spokane, the 195 corridor going out into Eagle Ridge. The corridor, and especially how it connects to I-90, is a nightmare. It's been a nightmare for 20 years. Everybody's known about it for 20 years, but we keep pushing permits out there, and it's the only way into town. You know, so there's one that's like somebody should years ago and said, stop, until you figure out a new system. And we've got some ideas how to fix that too, but, you know, DOT is like, well, that's a $30 million solution. Like, yeah, it is, but it's not a $2 billion solution to rebuild the I-90 bridge either. So there are things like that you can do, but it happens all the time. Again, you know, not to pick on the city of Spokane, but on the upper South Hill, Target's gone in. All these other things, Lowe's or Home Depot just went in, a block from Target. Big boxes are being planned across the street from Target. Tons of multifamily out in that area. Regal hasn't been improved in a generation. It's still 3 lanes and 2 lanes as you get into it. Freya, the other logical one, because it actually touches the freeway, is all residential. You'd have to buy 100 homes and bulldoze them out to fix that. So you've got these enormous problems that should have been handled when you consider the impact of development on transportation. That's what we're doing up front in this round. So we won't recommend something to be built if it's gonna cause the transportation system to fail.
So on the north side of the river where the Spokesman Review owns.
Yes,
Where they're talking about building low income housing or whatever, that's what I've heard, rumor has it, low income.
I'll explain that sign.
But the $3 million worth of roads that are coming from taxpayers, why doesn't the developer have to pay for that road?
They do, and they do, but they typically get reimbursed out of the taxes that the property generates. That's how the tax.
So the developer
works.
really truly doesn't pay for the infrastructure.
It's been done in other places here in the area. But
Okay.
back to that sign, when the sign was put up, it was a legal notice. And the lawyers said, put everything on the sign that we are allowed to do in the TIF lift law. And since it was first passed, the legislature added the ability to do affordable housing with lift or TIF funds. So they put that on the signs to say, we're allowed to do this. Nobody's come to us with any plan for that area. We know of nothing formal for that area. There's nothing in our shop for that. So it's,
Because it was my understanding that those signs, even though it was on the signs were on the north side of the river, that it was actually referring to the south side of the river.
all the public improvements have to be on the south side of the river because they must be in the current urban growth area. They cannot go on the north side of the river.
Okay, so the north side of the river that they that rumor has that they're putting low-income housing and $3 million worth of
Right.
infrastructure, roads and on and on and on. Are you planning on talking about that in the future part of this meeting, or now is a good time?
I, we brought a map, from that TIF lift discussion, because it's really misleading. The parts south of the river that are in the urban growth area are where you could build these projects using these funds. But when that was drawn some 10 years ago, we drew a boundary up Harvard and across Euclid and included those lands. Somebody might have been thinking, well, in 10 years, this may be in an urban growth area and we want to get ahead of it, but it's not in the urban growth area now. It will be one of those areas studied to go into the urban growth area. But even those decisions have to be based on need and adequacy to support your 20-year growth horizon. And if that means that half of that growth can be accommodated in existing vacant lands in the urban growth area, then the new lands outside of where the current UGA is are going to be relatively few and relatively small. So a bigger parcel like that may not be ultimately desirable.
Someone's online.
Yeah.
So
So let me get Victoria again for you.
hang on 1 second though.
So it would not be I'm confused. It would not be desirable because of what reasoning?
If, let's say that by the full analysis is done and we're looking at 25,000 housing units over 20 years. And we discovered that within lands in the cities and in that are vacant in the current urban growth area, we can accommodate 20,000 of those homes. Now we only need to find land for 5,000. Where that starts to get chosen is, where are the lands that don't affect the transportation system? Where are the lands that are already close to sewer and water? Where can school districts absorb these lands? And so the idea is that probably in 2 or 3 or 4 smaller pockets in edges, rather than one big project that puts an enormous strain on the overall infrastructure. Spokane County is growing at 1% plus a year to make that 100,000 for 20 years. If it grows faster, we can accommodate it. But if you try to jump out and say, well, let's take 400 acres and just get ourselves ready for it, that's where the the Growth Management Act comes back and says, no, you can't do that because you did not demonstrate a legal need to make that happen. And so we have to pull ourselves back and say, we can't do it, or we just get appealed and we get sued.
And the housing that, like you said, that you haven't seen anything stating that
No.
but I'm sure you've heard the rumors then.
Yes,
Are they supposed to be apartments? Are they supposed to be,
it is only a rumor.
all of it?
In our discussions with developers and landowners, some have some concepts of ideas, but nothing that is in there. That affordable housing language is on the sign because the lawyers said it had to be there. It doesn't mean they're gonna build affordable housing. It means it's allowed in the law.
Okay.
I'm
And-
sorry it's ambiguous, said the early
No,
part.
that really helps.
We don't,
because-
some parts of government don't always talk to the other parts of the government, so we didn't know that was going up, or we could have at least made contact with, many of you in the Otis Orchards area and said, look, this is up here, here's what it means.
So for them to do something on the north side of the river, they would have to post another sign?
Oh, at the very least.
Oh, yeah, but
They
we
would-
would be notified. Right now, what's going on is not affecting the north side of the river.
Yes, that's true, that's correct. I should have been more clear. That TIF lift, that is a renewal of a taxing assessment argument, has nothing to do with the comprehensive plan or growth from the comprehensive plan. It will not drive decisions about growth for the comprehensive plan. It's designed to build stuff on the other side of the river. So it's totally separate from what we're doing. Yes, sir.
Just to my question, so I can.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hold just a second? We had somebody in line.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Victoria.
Awesome, thank you. I actually do not live in the area where you're at right now. I live south of town in Latah and you were just talking about Latah Valley and the Latah development in Eagle Ridge. Urban reserve is the zone distinction that I live in. I don't see it reflected on on the chart that you have up right now. What are your conversations happening about the urban reserve zone and increasing density in there? I live on a 4.5 acre lot. I looked into doing some division and adding more units on my lot myself and my parcel. I can only add one ADU, and it has to be an ADU and has to meet ADU requirements.
Right.
If you can talk about urban reserve, that'd be great.
Sure. Urban reserve is a zoning classification created at the first time Spokane County created a comprehensive plan. It was set out to try to preserve bigger pieces of land on the edge of the urban area so they could accommodate more dense development 20 and 30 years into the future. That's why they started out at a minimum of one dwelling unit per 40 acres, and now they're one dwelling unit per 20 acres. You cannot divide urban reserve below that. Any lands that are smaller than that were those created at the time urban reserve was created. And so it won't develop unless it comes into the urban growth area and then can have an urban zone classification assigned to it. Does that help?
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense, but then that also creates more HOA housing and unaffordable housing, which is not what's necessarily needed. Whereas you're talking
There-
about like the AMIs, like we don't need more $800,000 houses. We need more $200,000 houses.
There are so many inconsistencies in the Growth Management Act, it makes us all crazy. Some are just outright contradictions, and some are, one hand says one thing, the other hand says you can't do that same thing, and you kind of try to figure out how to make that happen. So it's 35 years of law that just keeps added on, and it needs some fixing, but that's not tonight's issue. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the urban growth area.
Sure.
That's north of the river between Harvard and Myers or Gallup.
Okay.
So that is in the urban growth area,
No, it is not.
but it's not in. So the meeting I went to, at the county commissioners meeting, which you were at a couple of weeks ago, that tax increment area,
Yes.
was it included? That's where I'm getting
Oh,
confused. at.
yes.
So,
Let me jump to a minute.
so that,
The tax increment issue has nothing to do with the comprehensive
I
plan.
know that.
And so, the urban, part of this area is in an urban reserve classification south of Euclid for the most part. Others are in the R5 of Otis Orchards and some of the zoning over here where the Avista parcel is. None of it is in the urban growth area. Much of it is proposed, or landowners have requested or said they are interested in coming into the urban reserve area. We've got 100 of those. And that is one criteria we use, but it's the last criteria we use. All of these are studied based on those infrastructure. How does it fit? Can you afford it? Will the schools have enough capacity? Can the fire district serve it? So if you go back to this is kind of how they get sorted. Those 7 criteria on the right side of the slide, you have to make 5 of those to reach over this hurdle to get to the next hurdle. Then we do the population analysis. How much land can we still fill inside the urban area? Well, here's what we think we need outside of it. Now, what's outside, what is best positioned on this thing to be those lands that are in a place where they're ready to develop? And it's gonna be things like highways and infrastructure, capacities here. It's gonna be hard financial stuff on where those are best positioned.
So going back to something you said just a little earlier, somebody drew a line down Euclid from Marker to Harvard, and that chunk of land is reserve. Is that what you're saying?
It is if. I don't see it because, I mean. back to that map. These don't have. These don't have zoning classifications on them, but essentially, yes, this land is generally urban reserve over to Harvard and west of that, and the one immediately east of Harvard. South of Euclid. Nothing north of Euclid, east of Campbell, is anything other than, I believe, R5.
On that map, will you touch where Harvard,
Yeah.
Euclid and Campbell are?
Here's the Harvard intersection on I-90,
Okay,
coming up to the river right here.
okay,
This is Euclid.
okay,
And
And
Campbell,
Campbell
I
is-
believe, is this right here.
okay. And so that property is subdivided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces?
Probably. Can't quite see it from here. I'm sure you're right.
So is there a difference between the different shades of color?
Yes, this is an early map on using our geographic mapping system that looks at every parcel and then balances it against those 7 criteria. The green parcels meet the most criteria, and then the red ones in other words, the darker the parcel, the more of the 7 criteria they meet. And this is what we're also updating this now, because what it does is, for example, in some areas, here, for example, that green parcel meets all of the criteria, the red one underneath it meets, I think 4 of the 7, but they're contiguous. If they're going to develop, they're probably gonna develop either together or at the same time. So we go back and look at what are logical combinations that should be considered and studied as one parcel, even though they're broken into 2 or more pieces.
When do you anticipate the map being updated?
Likely December. Because what we'll be doing through meetings like this is talking about these alternatives, going back to their board and the planning commission to get their sense of how far toward density versus how far toward UGA do we want to go? And once we know that, then we'll go back to the map and say, what are the next round of parcels that meet this criteria?
So there is a chance it could be a 50-50 split between infill and expansion of the UGA areas.
There's a chance, I don't think offhand, well, yes, there's a chance. I'll leave it at that. We want to provide as much flexibility as we can for this part of the argument so that we don't cut anything out that we would regret later.
I've got some land that actually looks like it's gonna be studied by you guys to be included in the urban growth area. My neighbors, some of them are for it, some of them have questions, and that's why I'm here. If you decide that you don't wanna be included in the urban growth area, I'm on the fringe. Should I be writing letters? Should I be speaking up at these meetings? What?
If you've got access to the web, go to our website and we've got a comp plan button and there's a place to put comments down there.
Okay.
Just say, this is my name, this is the parcel I have, I'm really not interested in growing.
Okay,
And that's very helpful for us.
One of the criteria was a letter of interest, wasn't it?
Yes.
You had to actually express a desire to be included in the UGA.
No, you didn't have to. In fact, we are not legally allowed to accept applications for UGA inclusion. That said, developers since the last UGA was created, when is it gonna expand? When am I gonna get my land in? So all we could say is, tell us you're ready to go, that you're interested in doing this, and we'll make it a criteria. But it's at the bottom of the list. We have to meet the statutory and the financial criteria. But if they do, and there's 2 parcels and one doesn't want to develop and one is ready, sure, we'll pick that one every time because we want to see the development go forward where it needs to go.
and this is you probably get this question all the time. If I am rezoned from R5 to, I don't know, low density or whatever. How do my taxes start working, or how does that factor in, and what options is it good for me to go this way, and why should I keep R5?
There is no plan, and mostly today, we're talking about these urban growth areas, which is urban zoning and the urban densities. We've been working with our small communities, we've got a whole rural lands component, including our ag and mineral resources. there is no plan on the table to change any rural zoning into any kind of urban zoning other than the urban reserve. So if you're in R5, unless you and your neighbors come in together and say, we've got 50 acres in R5 and we're really interested in building, we're not gonna touch it. In fact, we're working with you and our historic preservation office to say, what can we do if Otis Orchards wants to make themselves a permanent part of an R5 zone that you know, builds sort of a regulatory fence around it. And we haven't talked to everybody there, so I don't know how, you know, popular that would be, but we're
It
not
would be
looking at.
popular.
That's my impression.
Yeah.
Last time. There's no plan whatsoever to change any of those rural zoning categories into something else. Unless you're already in, you know, an urban reserve zone.
Yeah.
Or right on the edge of the urban growth area.
I think I am right on the edge of your. Without getting.
Well, and the map on that table, shows kind of the whole composite metro. And you can see there are hundreds of parcels, and we're not gonna need all of those by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
Take,
I guess, to expand on his question, because he asked about what if you go to a rural zone to a urban zone and the tax implication?
oh,
Do we have something that we could point to as like? Because typically when you do enter urban zone, your taxes do go up, so I
Sure.
just wanted to bring that up.
no, that's a good point. We can work on a kind of a one-page sheet with, the assessor's office and put it up. What it would do. Yes, ma'am.
And looking at all of the green, the light green and a little darker green
Yes.
that's just north of the river there. That's all urban reserve right now, or is the first, I think it's 3 parcels just west of
They-
Harvard, is that R20 still?
Here or here?
Well, all of that, but I mean, the first 3 right there, aren't they still R20?
These are urban reserve.
But are they R20? Because they were. at
Oh,
one
I see what
point
you're
R20.
saying. Yes, one dwelling unit per 20 acres is the limit in urban reserve. That's correct.
Okay, so that's still a current policy?
Yes.
Okay, so how does that get switched? If you guys decide to switch that? Or is that something that, you know, as a resident of Otis Orchards, we can say, we would like this area of urban reserve to remain within the 5 acre? It's still within the boundaries of Otis Orchards.
If, as an example, if part of this wanted to downzone into R5 from urban reserve, they could simply come to us and say, we're not interested in developing anytime soon. And so we would take them out of the urban reserve area. There's no point in them being there if they're not in some of the path of development. But
So
there's,
that's the landowner's purview.
well, we certainly talk to them first.
Right.
There are lands, for example, on the West Plains on the south side of I-90 that were platted for light industrial use 20 and 30 years ago that is slowly converted to residential. And a lot of that will be recast as residential, but that's already in the urban growth area. So those are different kinds of changes. But again, there's no plan anywhere to move anything out of an R5 zone in any of this work. Other questions? This is kind of the guts of what we had, so if not, I can just take some questions, or we can put a slide up here that has those criteria on it again. Just put some of these up here to see where some of those areas were. Yes, sort of a timeline. We are hoping to publish a draft EIS on or about December 1st. That will be a chance to look at what we've studied within these bookends and given guidance from our board and our planning commission that'll lend itself to a final EIS in February. There's a 45-day public comment period when that EIS is published in December 1st. If any of you or all of you are already on our list, you'll get a notification when that's out, and you can comment back to us at any time. And then the plan will go forward with a final EIS, after which we will take those, which will have some of the transportation infrastructure, it'll have some of these other pieces. We'll then go back to all of the rest of the GMA elements, parks, open space, trails, and see how that all gets connected. with the idea of having a draft version of the comprehensive plan itself ready about July of 26. So this is another really important step in how we're looking at what our growth should look like over these next 20 years.
I just thought of something else. I went to zoning, several Fridays in a row, and one of the things that one of the gentlemen that works for zoning told me is that, I don't know if it was zoning or planning or the county or we're
We
sued.
are zoning and planning.
Or zoning, planning, county, I don't know, but we're sued because of the overbuilding.
Not quite.
Can you
In
explain
20,
that to me, that lawsuit?
there have been a lot of lawsuits.
Okay.
In 2015, the last time the county was going through this exercise, it drew an urban growth area that the population projections didn't support. That UGA, as part of the entire comprehensive plan, was appealed to the Growth Management Hearings Board, and the appeal was upheld. The county was found to be out of compliance. In the meantime, the current law at that time assumed that when the county board adopted that plan, it was legally valid. And so developers came in and brought in all sorts of plats, because it's like, well, we got a new plan, we got a new UGA. When the plan was found to be invalid, those plats had vested. So now all of this, you see in our bigger map, there's a lot of urban platted area that's not in an urban growth area. That kind of dates, some of that dates to the mid 2000s when that happened. There were 7 lawsuits in all that were brought to the county. We worked our way through, and in the last 4 years, we've cleared all of them. We got back into compliance in March of this year. But the lawsuits came from drawing an oversized UGA that we did not have the data or the market data to support.
Okay.
And that's why.
And that's why you
being so
guys are
careful.
being watched like hawks
Yes.
to make sure that you're.
There's no point in doing something. It's like, well, if 10 developers want 1,000 acres of land, well, we could draw that boundary around it. It's just gonna get appealed and we'll all be in court for another 5 years. It's not gonna get anybody down the road any faster than doing it the right way.
So that over assumption of growth that was approved by the Spokane County Planning Commission and the Spokane County Commissioners at the time?
In 2015 and 2016, yes.
So that was Al French, Mary Cooney, and
I don't think Mary was there.
Shelley.
Todd probably was there. Barney? No,
Yeah, Bonnie Maker.
I think Al was there though.
Al was there.
Yeah.
He's probably the only one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he'd be the only one who's still be.
Shouldn't be.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, other thoughts, questions, and in terms of getting a hold of us, if you go here, you can find an easy way of reaching all of us. And my phone number is 477-1500. You can call me anytime. And we'll keep this information coming out to you. And I know we're gonna run out of time fairly soon here, but if you've got specific ideas related to parts on a map, we left out some sticky notes, we left out some pens. Feel free to just write down things you like or don't like, or stay out of this area, or I like this area. We're happy to keep those comments on these 2 maps on the tables. Something on your mind, I can tell.
oh, sorry. No, I recently listened to a KPBX program that talked about the Haystack Heights co-housing community.
Yeah.
And that's considered infill, but as a co-housing community, it fits all of the requirements, and from what I've seen of co-housing communities, they fit all of the requirements that you're looking for the neighborhoods that you're looking to generate. Intergenerational, multi-band, economic, depending on the build types. A mixed use of townhomes, single unit dwellings, with minimal impact to infrastructure. Are there any other plans within Spokane County's current urban growth areas or any other plans like that?
No,
Okay,
none of this time. Now, having said that, yeah, the mix you've described is that desirable neighborhood mix. We're looking at it though as a bunch of individually owned properties that are full dwelling units, not shared kitchens or shared social spaces, you know, like a community housing project. The planning and zoning as it's envisioned wouldn't prohibit that. I'm short of other issues that would be, it wouldn't fit into a, you know, a sewer system or wouldn't fit into something else, but it's not designed to catalyze that kind of housing. The mix of uses, yes, but not where you're sharing spaces in a single commonly owned structure.
and is there a particular reason why not?
No. I guess we started with let's look at where the traditional development is in the county's urban growth areas and see if we can refine and give that some improvements instead of introducing this unknown. Whether
Not completely unknown, as
it is,
Haystack is shown.
depending on, I'll tell you something, I don't know if you like it or not. I permitted that structure when I was the city's planning director. It was not allowed at the time. It was not allowed by the city's zoning code at the time. And we found that it had a community purpose that was different, and so we went ahead and permitted it, and it got started in 2012.
Is it-
Right.
So you
Oh,
had-
yes,
so you then worked with Murata McKay.
If that's one of the originals, then yes, but I'm sorry, don't worry. But it was controversial.
This is like a less like cool version of that, but the state is also supporting single room occupancy homes again. We're not required as the county to have to allow that, but we can pursue that, but a lot of the cities are starting to allow that type of housing, which is like a co-housing with shared facilities, kind of like the Haystacks project. The Haystacks project was just it was pretty ground roots. There's a lot of people that came together to get the capital to do it. But there's going to be more opportunities like that housing, for that housing to come about, at least within the city jurisdictions.
Anybody else?
No.
Okay.
Well, Scott, I'd like to say, thank everybody who's here this evening. Myself and Lonnie are both county planning commissioners. And you can join us tomorrow for 3 more hours of this. And I want to say thank you, really, but please do join us. It's a big chore and we need the input from all of you.
And the planning commission's meeting tomorrow is gonna focus on one of those GMA chapter elements, and it'll be the climate resiliency one, because it's brand new and we have to understand that before we can do a lot of this other stuff, so. You can dial in on Zoom, but if you're interested in that, sure, join us at 9 AM.
Are environmental studies typically part of a comprehensive evaluation of a site?
Yes, maybe not in the way you're thinking though. The State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, is generally required on a project-specific basis. So if somebody's putting up a multifamily project, they have to do a SEPA checklist of how does it affect all these things from transportation to fish. What we're doing with an EIS is a much broader version of that same environmental background. If we make these changes to our development rates, what changes does that have negatively on the environment? How do you mitigate it? So there are certain housing projects that don't require a SEPA specifically, but most commercial ones do, and this is a SEPA on steroids.
Would a parcel that already has a completed CIS would be any more oh gosh, I'm trying to think of, would it have any more weights in being considered for integration into the UGA or Spokane City or Airway Heights or any of the other outlying areas?
It could be, if it's got infrastructure that is either there or planned and in a sense, budgeted for by the nearby cities. Yeah, that's one of the big factors when you get past this first broad brush. Down to, okay, we need 500 acres, where are we gonna pick it up in 50-acre pieces?
And one of the additional criterias I saw in the legend, was city request.
Oh. The UGAs, the entire UGA is considered in two factors. One is all of the acreage as a whole has to be brought together and say, how much total acreage do you have under this classification, regardless of where it's located, whether it's in Latah or Spangle or Deer Park or Spokane. And then the others are the ones that are attached to the cities. That decision, though, on the UGA boundary is exclusively the county board's decisions. The cities have no action taken. Having said that, though, we have created a steering committee of elected officials, which has the mayors of all of the cities and towns, as well as county board. That group does like what you're doing. They're gonna review recommendations and they will collectively help guide us on where that UGA boundary should go. So each city has a chance to comment on where their growth is. The city requests that have come from those specific cities. Airway Heights, they have a UGA that's right now on the top part of the north part of their city. Part of it includes the county ORV park. Why that's in there makes no sense at all. They want to move it around to their west side where they've got room without affecting the mission of Fairchild Air Force Base. Deer Park is anticipating growth once the North Spokane corridor is completed. They want to move from their north side to their south side. Medical Lake, again, has urban growth area on their north boundary right next to the Air Force. They want to move it over on their east side, or some of it on their east side. Those are the requests they're making to us, and those show up on these maps. And they get evaluated like all the rest, but it's a chance for the city to say, this is where we want to grow. Yes, sir.
What if Liberty Lake wants to move their boundary to the north side of the river up to Euclid?
Well,
What happens then?
that's their choice. That's not a county, that's their choice, and annexation is generally driven by property owners. It's not driven by municipalities. So if those property owners wanted to be annexed, they would ask the city to do that.
They tried that about 20 years ago.
Did they
Yeah.
just try it
Uh,
to it? That's super.
Huh?
They just.
Yeah, for what it's worth, our conversations with the city of Liberty Lake have been extensive over the last 3 years. They've put together their land capacity analysis. They've gone so far as to create a build-out analysis to say, how long will it take us to use up everything we've got here? And that's where we're gonna end up. And they think that'll happen within this 20-year horizon. But the mayor, the administrator, planning folks have said, in no uncertain terms, at this time, Liberty Lake has no interest in growing beyond its boundaries.
That's good news.
I think so.
Another question. Back to the Harvard Euclid.
Yeah.
Intersection, why did they post all the signs on the north side if it didn't,
Because it's in that district boundary. It had to be
did
posted.
they put it also on the south side, on the property that they're actually wanting to build on? Or
They
did
would
they
have
just
had to have
trying to
posted
get our
it.
goats and get those, the churches all riled up?
Yeah, I don't think they did that deliberately. When you do a land action, you have to typically post it on like 4 visible points of the affected land. So there were probably 3 signs on the south and the one up on the, I don't know where the.
Cause I
other
think there was
were.
3 on the north and you would
There
know
were-
that. There was 3 on the north
And
and
there was 3 on that. There was a couple over on Framer and one actually on a spray.
okay, okay, so they were just.
They're legal
putting it-
requirements. They have to be so big, they have to be so far or so close, so far apart. But it's a legal requirement. It has to be on the edges of the property. And you can see on that map, that light green, none of that's in the urban growth area, but years ago, somebody drew it in the TIF district, so they had to post it there.
Yeah, that was something
I
I
just-
just thought a number
I'm
of
just
years
like,
ago that it was.
I know,
You know, the trickery of pets got on that property. It's like.
I can't tell you any more or less than those are 2 separent issues and it's
Perfect.
nothing that we're
I
considering
greatly
whatsoever.
appreciate you explaining that, though. I'll sleep tonight.
And if you see other signs for anything else, give us a call. We'll track it down and find out what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I greatly appreciate for a way to bring it down so that somebody that doesn't planning and understand. what
It's confusing when two parts of the government are talking to each other.
I used to teach school, you don't have to explain anything more.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, we can have.
How did you do that? You gotta go and talk to these people.
Yeah.
I know,
But I
the last
greatly
time I went to
appreciate
this one
it.
on the second.
And
Look it up online. Should be posted.
That was
Just this week.
Okay.
City Plan Commission.
fantastic.
A little late jump on those things. But they're pretty fine using because I got it.
Okay.
I just messaged him and said, hey, you want me to RV back so I can go first thing, but we'll see anybody.
Oh,
You might
okay.
be good for it. I'm gonna steal your donut though if I come in the morning.
Yeah, you can have my donuts.
Yeah, and then how's it, how to do that? Month, and it's now,
We got there. I've been. No, because they won 2 games into it. And they have to win it. That's more the interest. Yeah. Good. Jet lag, who knows? All the adrenaline from the first 2 wins. Oh, no, you're fine. How are you? Yeah.
What is kind of question about you?
So. I'm very here. What they generally do, they're afraid.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah, okay. Actually, very clear statement. Somebody is really pushing that.
Aggregated one first, because it didn't make sense.